Everybody would please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Chair moves for approval of the agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Announcements, June 10th is a regular board meeting at 6 o'clock p.m. in the ESC Community Room. And now we'll move on to the Share the Success. Jeff?
Good evening and welcome. My name is Jeff Peterson. I'm the Activities Director here at Mound Westonka High School, and I'm extremely proud and honored to be here tonight to recognize two unbelievably talented student athletes here at Mound Westonka High School. Begin here tonight just talking about the history of the Yost Award. In 1953, Frank Yost was a pharmacist in Mound and was an avid supporter of Mound athletics. Frank died in 1952 at the age of 81, and the Mound Chamber of Commerce began an award called the Yost Award for three-season athletes, which became the annual award for all athletes to strive for. The annual award for service, character, athletics, citizenship, leadership, cooperation, sportsmanship, and scholastics. Over time, the Yost Award moved to the Yost Hadorf Leopold Award. Corey Leopold, a 1988 graduate who was an outstanding wrestler for Mound Westonka High School and UMD, where he was an All-American in 1990 and 91. Corey was killed in an automobile accident at the age of 23. His father, Howard, coached wrestling at Mound Westonka High School for 25 years, from 1969 to 2003. After Corey's death, Howard and Carolyn chose to add a scholarship component in memory of their son, Corey, in 1994. Oscar Hadorf, Coach Hadorf, he taught Phi Ed, coached football, basketball, and track, and was the athletic director at Mound High School from 1944 until he retired in 1969. In June 1970, he passed away in a freak accident while working at Lakeview Golf Course. Our stadium, where football, soccer, and lacrosse are played, is named in his honor. In 1995, Oscar's son Bob began giving a monetary award for the Yost, Hadorf, Leopold, and Athena winners to honor the memory of his father. Again, I'm extremely honored and privileged to recognize Sam Diazeghi and Abby Hollenstein. Come on up. On May 18th, I believe, we recognized these two along with their classmates at our senior athletic breakfast. Sam is a 3.89 GPA, Abby 3.995, and just tremendous students. Sam, parents Tom and Kathy, Abby, Mike, and Cindy. I'm just going to hit a few highlights for these two here tonight. I could talk for about 10 minutes. Sam said I had 5, and Mr. Borg said he could shot put me if I went beyond 5 minutes. Sam, he's going to play football next year at Concordia Moorhead. He's been our team captain, 3-year starter, 3-year letter winner in football, was our lineman of the year, 2-time all-district selection, offensive lineman of the year in 2022, Minnesota High School All-Star football game participant. He's all-state in track and field, all-conference, 2-time academic all-state in the wrestling guillotine, 2-time state place winner, Last year as a junior, he placed fourth, and this year he lost a tough match in the championship and took second. 11-time letter winner, and he will be participating, as he did last year in the state track tournament. He will be participating this Friday at St. Michael Albertville High School, throwing the shot. Abby, I'm going to say this too. Sam had 99 pins in his career as a wrestler, which is a school record. Yeah. Congrats. 124 wins. He wanted that 125th win, and he wanted that 100th pin in that last match, and unfortunately came up short. As I said, Abby, parents Mike and Cindy, again, 3-sport athletes: soccer, basketball, track, and field. 2-year captain in track, senior captain in basketball, all conference in track in 2021 and 22. Honorable mention in all conference in basketball, state participant in track last year, and again on Friday this week, she will compete at St. Michael Albertville. 11-time winner as well, and just 2 tremendous student athletes here at Mound West Tonka High School who have led our senior class and our underclassmen, not only this year, but in the past. We've had an unbelievable school year with accomplishments. Not bummed that we moved the board meeting in here tonight, but over in the ESC, it's my month for the display case, so I was able to display a lot of hardware over there. We've had just a tremendous, tremendous school year. So thank you for your support. Thank you guys for coming tonight, and appreciate everybody being here. Take care. Abby and Sam.
Oh, you're not done yet. Encore.
Now we'll move on to public comments. Are there any members of the public that wish to come before the board tonight to speak? If so, please approach the microphone. We ask that you state your name, address, and also try to keep it to 3 to 5 minutes of talking. And the board will not take actions on things tonight, but if you request that we get back to you on things, we'll go from there. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Tom Notch, lived in the district since '85. Actually had the pleasure of serving on the school board until, gosh, probably 12 years ago. But at any rate, first of all, I want to thank all of you for your service at the district here. And it doesn't go unnoticed and unappreciated, I'll say that. I have noticed, though, that I see a concern on this bond issue coming up. And it's nothing that any of you guys did wrong, but I think you're really being very, very poorly served by our consultants here. And it's not too late to tap the brakes. And I think we need to kind of take a look at this thing. I'm not sure if Emily was able to get something we put on the screen or not, or.
They got your email.
I asked her to, okay, but she didn't do it. But okay, but you got the email that I sent you?
We all have it.
We all have the information.
We all
Yep.
have it.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
But basically, just kind of looking at this real quick, so you've got $93.4 million that we're looking at raising here. And with interest, it's really $170 million, a little bit over 170, according to Eller's numbers here. And it's odd that it's really gone up a lot. I know in the survey that was done in August of '22, it was $65 million. And now just 9 or 10 months later, it's up to 93.4. But at any rate, it's a 25-year bond. I was looking at Eller's site there. I can't find really any school bonds that are even running that long. That's a real long time. I know when I was on the board, typically they'd run like 15 years was considered a pretty long bond at that time. And I know from looking at other stuff at that time, I was able to catch a number of mistakes. I know one time they had 14 years on their schedule and everything, and it was a 15-year bond, and kind of caught them. I said, whoa, it was a little bit embarrassing. And they came back, and then they had the tax capacity was wrong too. So I think they do need to get looked at. And again, you guys shouldn't have to take the time to go through that, but I'm just concerned. If you look at this table here, this is one that the district has, but it's the one that shows the bar charts, and it shows the debt on here. And what I marked on here, basically what the district is telling people is that the tax on a $500,000 home is only going to go up $220. So that's what people are thinking they're going to be, biting off on. $220 is what we're telling them for a $500,000 house. In reality, if you go out further, it ends up being 2.3 times that amount, okay? And that shows up down a couple sheets later. And I'm just looking at this too, and they show like all of the bonds are all going away. And we all know in 25 years, we're gonna have to do a lot more work in this district. And my comment on the bottom here, I said, does the school district really expect us to believe that no additional bonds will be required in a full 25-year period of time? Considering Shirley Hills was constructed in 1951, Grandview in 1958, Hilltop in 1964, and the high school in 1971. This is, in my opinion, laughable. At the conclusion of the bond in 2049, our school buildings will range in age from 98 years old for Shirley Hills to 78 years old for our quote-unquote new high school. We all think of it as new. And I think that we have to make sure that people are on board for this, and I don't think your survey supports that. I did look at the statistics on that first survey that was done, and they had different percentages that people were willing to support. I weighed them all. They had one that was over $24 a month people, and I weighed that at $28. But I went through all the percentages, worked it out. It worked out to $7.66 a month that people were willing to be a part of, and that's a far cry from really what we're looking at here. So if we go to I'll try to hurry. I know you guys are busy. So if we look at this third sheet here, well, actually the third sheet is this bigger one, and I don't know if she printed it for you like an 11 by 17. If she didn't, you'll probably want to just take a look at this maybe when you get home on the PDF on your computer, okay? It's a little hard to follow. But basically what I have on the bottom here, I've got the new taxes due, and again, I used a $500,000 house. But in the first year, I went through the math, and lo and behold, I came out exactly what the district is quoting us, 220. That's good, it should be that way, okay? And then I took another step, and I said, well, in the fifth year, again, I'm all going by Eller's numbers on this table here. And I'm good at math, I'm an engineer, okay? But at any rate, going through that, it was $270 in year 5. And then I took another step. I said, well, how about year 9 through 24? In years 9 through 24, it's $502 per year that we're asking people to contribute for this. And another way to look at it, the total tax due over a 25-year period of time on a $500,000 home is a full $10,411. And it could be somebody's college education. So I'm looking at that. I don't think that we really prioritize things very well either. For on the first survey, it was 65 million, now it's 93.4. Something doesn't smell right to me. I think we need, I know a lot of it was this security, and I think that's good. I think almost everybody here, I believe it was 8.3 million roughly, I'm going from memory, that was for security for our schools, and I applaud you for doing that. And I think in the environment we're in now, we have to do things like that. But I think what we should do is have different items, put a 1 through 5 on them. How important are these things? Because what I'm concerned, if we have this big bond here, it possibly, very likely, could go down in flames, and then we're not addressing that need, which is a need. So if we did have it like question 1, question 2, it would make it more passable for the public, the parts that we really want. And if there are things that are less important, you know, then maybe they won't pass, but it's less of a big deal for us. And I talked a little bit about the 25-year length. That's a long time. That's over 2 full K-12 school cycles. You know, I shouldn't just say, well, what's Mr. Notch here? What's he complaining about? He'll probably be dead by the time this is over. And you know what? I will, and maybe some of us here will too. I wish you all long lives. But then the point is, that's a long, long time. And it's longer than any others I could find on the other site. And I think the only reason it was put out 25 years was to get the cost down as much as possible, okay? So if you want to look at that. And then this final sheet here, what I have on here, I just have this table again. It's one from the district, and I just had the annual tax impact, years 9 through 24, and then I did it for the total 25-year tax impact for the different properties. And for, like, say, $1 million house, you know, you're talking a $23,425. It's a fair amount of money, and they go down from there. But you can look at that at your leisure. But that's pretty much what I wanted to say to you guys. And if you guys have any questions for me that I can help in any way, like I say, I was on the board before. I did catch a number of pretty good-sized mistakes from our consultants. The other thing, too, I know we've got the architect. I don't necessarily need to name them. You know who they are. But they've got like about 6 different spots where you're putting additions on schools here. And I've done a lot of work. I mean, I've done Paisley Park back in the day. I've done many school buildings. You know, I've had my own structural engineering firm for 40 years, okay? And I've done, say, Cates, I mean, different colleges and that. I have done a lot of educational stuff. And if I saw an architect come to me with 6 different additions, different spots all over the school, I'm thinking, what are you thinking? You could build a whole new school building for the cost of this. And I just think that maybe that's what we should be looking. Maybe you want to look at even Kings Point Road. There's a lot of houses going in there. Maybe you should be looking at maybe an elementary school out there. But I'm not seeing this as a good bang for the buck, and I sure encourage you to go through my numbers. If you got any questions, you got my contact info on there, and I'd welcome it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else? If not, we'll move on to the treasurer's report. Ralph?
As soon as I find it.
You go through here.
All right, we begin with Ulster Environmental Annual Recognition Event, $500. Loeffler Annual Recognition Event, $500. Egan Company Annual Recognition Event, $500. Preferred One, West Tonka Wellness Credits, $37.90 and 37 cents. Preferred One, West Tonka Wellness Credit, I'm sorry, repeat. Anonymous, MWHS, $20. Charities Aid Foundation, MWHS, $130.98. West Tonka Football Boosters, MWHS, additional coaches for the football team, $17,478.47. West Tonka Community Ed Football, MWHS, additional coaches for the football team, $4,976.61. Anonymous Community Ed Sponsor, a student, $50. Butch Humbert, Larry XL Scholarship, $100. Pruitt Family, Eric Hagan Memorial Scholarship, $300. Mark Wakefield and Heidi Knight, Paquette Stance Team, $500. West Tonka Band Boosters, West Tonka Band Club, $3,150. West Tonka Choir Boosters, West Tonka Choir Club, $3,150. Various families for DECA, $6,910. And Mike Petrowski, West Tonka Football Softball Team, $200. Now we go to May contributions. Mary XL, Larry XL Memorial Scholarship, $1,000. Butch Humbert, Larry XL Memorial Scholarship, $100. Gerald Fitzsimmons, Brian Chase Memorial Scholarship, $50. Paula Prutzman, West Tonka Athletics, Dave Essel, Memorial $200. Roger Ellis, West Tonka Athletics, Dave Essel, Memorial $200. Yvonne and Gordon Whitecheck, West Tonka Athletics, Dave Ice, Memorial $20. Harlan and Lori Grimm, West Tonka Athletics, Dave Ice, Memorial $20. Carol and Howard Leopold, West Tonka Athletics, Dave Ice, Memorial $50. Patrick Furlong, West Athletics, Dave Ice, Memorial $25. Donald Wojcik, West Tonka Athletics, David Ice, Memorial $25. James and Sandra Starkman, West Tonka Athletics, David, probably East, I'm not sure how to pronounce this.
Yes.
Memorial $25, my apologies. Marcy Jerdy, West Tonka Athletics, East, Memorial $25. Bernard and Sharon Hames, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, Memorial $100. Gerald Hall, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, Memorial $100. Matthew Stratton, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, Memorial $100. William Greason, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, Memorial $100. Miles and Cheryl Cohen, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, Memorial $100. G&L and Susan Hoffman, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, Memorial $100. John and Kelly East, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, Memorial $500. Russell Runk, West Tonka Athletics, Dave East, $50. Scott Drill, West Tonka Athletics, David East, Memorial $200. And West Tonka Hockey Boosters, West Tonka Girls Hockey Team, $2,000. West Tonka Softball Boosters, West Tonka Softball Club, $1,099.05. GMS PTO, Grandview Middle School, $2,686.96. Hilltop PTO, Hilltop Primary School, $2,545.50. Shirley Hills PTO, Shirley Hills Primary, $2,721.49. Northwest Tonka Lions, Community Ed Music in the Park, $2,500. And finally, Jubilee Foods, Community Ed Music in the Park, $250. Donations year to date to the school, $271,922.40. And Mr. Chair and fellow board members, I have looked at the check ledger and checks, and all seems in order.
Thank you, Ralph. Serenity, we'll move on to the student representative report.
Good evening. All right, I will get started in activities. Student Senate held a very successful prom at the Nicollet Island Pavilion on May 6th, hosting 349 students. Our Senate also attended the final Hennepin Division meeting this year, hosted by Hennepin Division President Laura Sonneborg at Orono High School. Upcoming seniors Maisie Wheeler and Alyssa Brandt were chosen to serve on the division board for next year. Last month, we also distributed our awards and recognized members for their years of service and dedication to the group. This included honoring 4 Senate seniors that have served all 5 years of high school. Student Senate elections were held last month, with the new cabinet consisting of roughly 35 general members. Officer elections were held afterwards. Next year's officers will be President Natalie Miner, Vice President Olivia Adam, Secretary Sammy Kroll, Treasurer Emma Carlson, and Communications Officer Stella Miner. Fashion Club, Outdoor Endeavors, Saga, Spanish Club, Gaming Club, Link Crew, Environmental Club, Letters of Love, Future Medical Professionals, and SAD held their final meetings last month and are looking forward to the next school year. In the arts, concert choir auditions for the following school year were held, and the new roster for the next year was made available. Concert choir sang for graduation last week as their last performance for the year. Band hosted their last concert on May 8th and performed for the last time this year at graduation. Select members of the Play That Goat Strong has started rehearsals today for their excerpt that will be presented at the State Theater on June 13th. Similarly, members of the fall musical recognized as featured or outstanding began rehearsals for Spotlight Showcase. Mount West Tonka Theater is excited to be sending 4 individuals myself as featured dancer, Maeve Linkert as an opening number performer, Ava Frazier as an outstanding performer, and Eve Gautry for technical assistance with load-in and sound production. West Tonka Community Theater begins rehearsals this evening for their July showings of their summer show, Bye Bye Birdie. Mad Jazz and Jazz Band performed their extensive repertoires at Coffee House Jazz last month to much applause from the community. Auditions to fill available Mad Jazz spots will be held this summer on August 8th. In athletics, the girls lacrosse team finished their season with a section loss to WCC champions Hutchinson. It was a well-fought battle, and the lacrosse team is graduating 8 seniors. The softball team finished their season 7-14 and seeded 6th in the section tournament. Notable this season was a grand slam home run by Sammy Kroll in their first section game. The boys tennis team finished the season with a record of 13-5. They won overall place in the Wright County Conference for the second season in a row. Overall, they had 50 participants spanning grades 6 through 12. Overall, the team had 4 conference winners, seniors Jackson Briggs and Ben Navy, and juniors Charlie Paul and Carter Reinbold. The team also earned Academic All-State Silver Division with an average GPA of 3.6. Jackson Briggs, Ben Navy, and Ambrose Newman were awarded individual Academic All-State. The girls' track and field team won conference, won True Team section, and placed 10th in True Team state. The boys' team finished 2nd in the Section 6 AA meet. This year, the team set 8 new school records and 5 section records. A total of 15 athletes head to state track and field meet on June 9th and 10th next week. Golf and baseball both declined to comment this month, but have seen much success recently. Golf played their final conference match on May 15th and was followed by a 2-day invitational on May 17th and 18th. The Whitehawks ended up in a 4th place for the season. Notably, Luke Centerborg earned honorable mention all-conference. Baseball saw recent success over Delano in round 2 of the section playoffs and played against Benilde St. Margaret yesterday in the section semifinal. With the conclusion of the spring conference season, the Mound West Tonka Activities Department recently learned that in the past 3 school years, MWHS ranks #1 in conference titles with a total of 17. This is an incredible accomplishment for the department and all of the programs. And finally, in academics, the speech team declined to comment this month, but has recently competed in Kentucky and experienced much success. Similarly, of course, as you all know, Mound West Tonka High School held our graduation ceremony last week and graduated a class of 202 seniors. The last day of classes at the high school for returning students was last Friday, the 2nd. And I just want to take a moment to say thank you for allowing me to serve as the student representative, and it has been a wonderful opportunity.
Well,
Thank you,
sir,
sir.
We want to thank you too. We have a little something here for you. Thank you.
Can you get her a card?
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
We'll move on to the focus report.
Good evening, board members and also audience, and for the public that's watching, an exciting board meeting for us today. And so I just got an email, Peter, who's going to be presenting on the survey results, was presenting at a board meeting before this and it got a little bit delayed. And so we're going to just go in a different order here and then come back to him. Thinks he'll be here around 8, I think, is when he thinks he can be here. So we're going to talk a little bit about our process and how we are where we are now. And I have with us Ehlers and Wold Architects with me, and so we're thankful for them attending. But really want to say thank you to the whole community. This has really been an incredible journey that we've been on for the past couple of years. I appreciate the engagement, the communication that people have shown us as we've worked on trying to put together a plan that serves our students well, our staff well, in this community well. And as you see this, and as I've been presenting, we started this review back in 2021-22 when we were looking at areas of in-depth study. And that took us to say that first thing we want to do is look at a demographic study. And so we completed our demographic study, and we saw that we were going to have stable enrollment over the next years to slightly increasing. And with that, we knew that when we were studying things like a new primary school or early childhood, those things with how we're looking at enrollment, we decided some of these other needs that we're talking about went before those. We did a community survey just to test that these areas that we're looking at were along the lines that our community were supportive of. And so at that time, we took a survey out, which was referenced here today, and we found that there was support around the topics that we were talking about. And so from there, we decided it made sense to invest more time, and so we got staff focus groups. And our staff focus groups dove into this information, and then our facilities committee continued to prioritize these needs. From January to April, we actively were seeking input with staff, then with parents, and then our community. And I'm really proud about how the communication from our board to our community, whether it was in print, whether it was through digital, whether it was meetings of trying to get input, but in this whole process, we want to make sure that the plans we were talking about represented this community well. We had some good turnouts at events. We got a lot of different feedback from people. And I'm really pleased to say that people were supportive of the plans that we were presenting. When we took input, when we had forms that people gave us information on, we saw a lot of support. And if they had a concern, of course we wanted that, but it was amazing how many people on the different reports, which are on our website, really appreciated the way that we were approaching this project. From there, we wanted to test it out again with the community survey. And we took the community survey out to see where the tax impact was and also how people felt about the scope of the project. Peter will be talking about that later tonight, but that too also showed that it was very positive. And so we sent out a communication again this last week saying that this survey's out. We shared the survey results and that our board was going to have this conversation today, trying to get that out in the community, that this was a discussion that we wanted to continue to move forward. We chose to hold it here in the Performing Arts Center in case there was questions or concerns, that everyone had a seat and they had an ability to be present and be able to engage. Which really leads our board now into this discussion of an action item, which is a resolution today to move forward with a review and comment, and then for me to prepare ballot language for them to take action on to bring to our June 10th school board meeting. When we look at the project overview, there's really three distinctive pieces, and one is the district-wide safety and security. What we're talking about is best practices of having secure entrances. We're talking about zone separation. We're talking about hardening of entrances, door alerts if doors are opened up, that we are notified that that's happening. Really trying to strengthen the control of building access. Some examples are Grandview Middle School. It's the one building that does not have a secured entrance in the sense that an office is at the entrance. And so in my presentation, if you look on the website, you'd see me go into quite a bit of detail about how this process would work. But we would be changing out the stage area and moving in the office, and then the old office would expand with the media center. The other thing that we talked a lot of detail about is zone separation, that if we wanted to lock down parts of the building, somebody wouldn't have full access of the building. We like this both in times of emergency, but also before school, after school, that people cannot just wander through all aspects of the building. When we talk about deferred maintenance, really looking at that we have older facilities, Shirley Hills 51 to the high school 71 for our four main buildings, and old buildings require maintenance. So we've really listed and prioritized what are the next things that we need to address in each of these facilities. We appreciate the community's support over the years. We feel our bones are good, but we do have to keep up with things. If it's a boiler, if it's air handlers, if it's if it's mechanical systems, if it's electrical systems. It also has us looking at things like the track, the tennis courts, and the fields. All require maintenance, and when we do maintenance on these things, do it in a way that it serves us well going forward. And so really trying to get this, that it meets the needs of our kids as we're looking forward. The third area that we're really highlighting was the high school redesign. And with that, really looking at a 1970, 1990s building and making that work well for students today going forward. Looking at renovating the entire building except areas that were recently updated, enlarging general ed and special ed classrooms that aren't at that standard size. And when we talk about the standard size and we look how education is delivered differently from the 70s, 90s of desks and rows, people facing the front of the classroom, overhead projectors, we're talking from a lecture-based system to more of a collaborative system. And it's not just space to fit people, it's sounds, it's how we interact, it's the activity of the classroom. When we look at vocational opportunities, looking at bringing back in machining, looking at the nursing program, looking at bringing in a carpentry program for our students. When we look at mental health services, right now how we serve that and how that's changed since the 70s and 90s, and now you get us in some passion projects of the needs our kids need to stay healthy, but also to serve them well. And having a space that is private, that's a space that that's designed for their purposes, and do it in a way that it adds additional value by creating a secure entry on that north side as we build that out. Also looking at the cafeteria and weight training areas that go out in the hallways. One would never design it for that purpose. That's what you do until you're able to come up with a design that meets those needs. And so we're looking at bringing that and correcting it. So examples are when we look at neighboring districts, a machining program that can serve our engineering program, it can work with our robotics program, and it can be a standalone vocational program, all utilizing similar spaces. When we talk about nursing programs, and we look at the need in society, but also the needs for our students to be able to get a CNA by taking these classes and taking a test outside of this class, and how that can work with some of our assisted living to career paths for some of our students. We also look at EMR, EMT programs. So when we look at the high school, we're talking about renovating space and adding space so that we can meet these different needs of these students, and this is on our website. It's in my presentation. We're also looking at the activity space of meeting the kids' needs moving forward, looking at 9 courts going to 12, looking at using the court space for parking, and the parking that's needed around this area is really self-evident. Looking at the field space that we have for kids to be able to use the fields in a way that allows more opportunities, but a better opportunity. Looking at having a stadium around our track that also can be used for football, lacrosse, and soccer. And as you're connecting that, making the improvements to the need by that JV football field. So with this, taking through these needs, we've appreciated the feedback. I wanted to bring up Paul Apikowski with Wold. Wold has been with the district since our 2011 bond. They've been able to connect on some of our mechanical needs, our different maintenance needs. They've been able to make a lot of these improvements. Wold's team put in this facility here, and so they give us a lot of confidence, one with their history of our facilities, but also the quality of the work that they do, and appreciate it that Paul's been with us this entire time. Welcome, Paul.
Thank you, Superintendent Borg and members of the board. As Kevin mentioned, we've been with the district for just over a decade now, and we are pretty familiar with the facilities across the district and have worked over the years to understand various things going on in buildings, the needs, how the programs fit in them, and so I've done quite a bit of analysis to help deepen our understanding of the districts. Over the last couple of years, we've been working with Kevin and the Facilities Committee of the board to help prioritize needs. So we've looked at a number of different things which have been covered already. And really over the last few months, as outlined in the schedule earlier, been working on isolating that down to the few things that are being contemplated to put to the community. Part of our role in that is to help estimate budgets for those projects. And we've been working very closely with the district's construction manager, Kraus Anderson, to do that. Referendum estimating is a bit of an art form and a bit of a science, but we've been doing that a long time along with Kraus Anderson. So one of the challenges we have is the projects are not fully finished and fully figured out. And so to estimate them, we're really recommending budgets for them. They're not estimates of actual construction, they're estimates of budgets. And that is generally done by counting up quantities of either square footage or items, and then putting that to unit costs, which again, we keep a database along with Kraus Anderson of costs in the industry. Those prices are also, or those estimates of cost are also inflated to project into the future. So if the district decides to go ahead and do a referendum, those projects would not be bid for some time and then would take some time after that to build. So we are trying to build in estimates for those things as well. Each budget is based on a cost for construction, but then the budget is increased with some allowances for things like fees and testing, for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, and also for some contingencies for unforeseen conditions. So again, we don't quote the projects. Neither Kraus Anderson nor Wold will build anything. All of that will be bid out through public bid law, either to low bidder or best value construction when the time comes. And again, our goal is to give the district a stable estimate of what it's going to take to get the project done. In the case of a bond, there's no going back for more money. It has to fit within the budget, and so we're doing our best to project for that. And then finally, just some of the categories, as Kevin mentioned, of the different parts of the project. So for security, we're recommending about $7,360,000 for security. And then quite a bit for district maintenance across the district, and that includes both inside and outside maintenance. There is a good amount of that is happening at the high school, both in the site and in the building, but it does also spread across the other parts of the district. And then for the high school redesign, almost $50 million, $47 million. So that is how we get to the total of about 91.5.
Are there questions from the board? One thing, Paul, can you talk a little bit about, once the bond passes, then how you go about design, and then you digging into the project?
Sure. In working on school projects, we've really developed a process that's highly collaborative. So we will involve not only the administration of the school board in it, but lots of stakeholders in the building and community. So we'll have a number of focus groups that we'll work with to collaborate on the design. That process will take, in the case of the high school, it'll probably take the better part of a year just to get through design. And then we'll go out to bidding and start with construction after that. On the other parts of the project, there are some of them that will take a lot less time to plan. So we will probably work with the district to try to identify some that can be done fairly quickly. And those might be done as soon as the summer right after the election, whenever that happens.
And then finally, you do a lot of different school districts, so does Kraus Anderson. So through that experience, can you just share a little bit about how you come up? Obviously, you have a lot of different clients. If you can just speak to that, of how that helps you with these estimates.
In the estimates, as I mentioned, both Wold and Kraus Anderson maintain a database essentially of costs of projects. And those vary from the cost of what an air handler costs or certain parts of a building up to square foot costs, which is significant parts of the high school project. We're actually estimating on the dollars per square foot based on either the level of renovation or the addition that needs to go into that. And we are both constantly bidding projects out. Every week we have projects being bid out, so we maintain a database of those bids and adjust continually. As well as during the design process, we do several estimates with both Kraus Anderson and our own consultant to make sure that we're staying on track.
I just know from our past experience, we have two bonds now. One was our 2011, and then also for the Activity Center and the Performing Arts Center. We were able to successfully complete both projects, and obviously we've been pleased with them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Next up, we're going to have Matthew Hammer come up with Ehlers, who's going to talk a little bit about the financing of our bond.
Thank you, Kevin. Good to see everybody again. My name is Matthew Hammer, Senior Municipal Advisor with Ehlers. And we're an independent municipal advisory firm, the pleasure of working with the school district for a long time. I think that independence is a key component of what we do from a firm perspective. We're required by statute, or required by law, to actually act in the best interest of the school district, and that's an important piece as we kind of looked at the planning that we were doing as part of this project to come up with a plan that met the goals that the district was looking for. And really what that came down to was us managing the tax implication of the plan when we're looking at a project of this scale. In essence, creating some consistency with those tax rates, which you'll see as we look through a little bit of this information. And then also trying to mitigate that interest expense, which we'll talk about. And you can see that we're splitting right now. We're planning to split the issue into 2 issues. And that is going to give us the ability, because there's really no reason for us to be paying for the full 25 years, the full par amount of the bonds. So that's really us looking at the timing, working with Wold and Kraus Anderson to figure out what your draw needs or when are you going to need the cash. And right now we've laid that out and worked really closely with Kraus and Wold to identify what your phasing plan is. And right now we're looking at 2 bond issues. With the first one here, estimated at about $43 million. Right away would be issued in February of '24, and then based on the anticipated construction schedule, we'd be coming back in February of '26 or thereabouts, depending on how the construction progresses, and issue the balance of the construction project. So we're really looking at 25-year repayment period, but we're not looking at a full 25-year bond. We're looking at shorter terms for each bonds, and as we kind of know more about interest rates as we get out into the environment, we'll be looking at what those final terms will be. But that's our estimates going into our initial pre-election estimates, or what we'll be sending for review and comment. Right now you can see the total par amount of the bonds is $93.4 million. That's what the bond amount would be on the ballot. And then you can see the various costs associated with that, with an estimated project number of $91.5 million, but we're also assuming some interest rate earnings as those funds are available to earn some interest to go towards the project costs as well. So we're trying to not issue a bond amount that's too much, because we know you're going to earn some interest during that construction period as well. So this really plays into, I think this is a good graphical representation of what we're looking at. The gray bars on the bottom there, those are the district's existing commitments. And the blue bars represent the district's capital project levy, with the assumption that the district would renew its existing capital project levy as part of a question this November. And then the orange bars represent the new anticipated debt service levies that include all of the principal and interest. So that's the debt service levy in total that we're assuming would be incorporated into the overall tax plan as part of this financing. You'll notice it's a wraparound structure is what we call it, and that wraparound structure really is there to manage the tax impact. So if we go back to the goal of the initial plan, the plan was to mitigate the tax impact and create some consistency for your property owners. And you can see that level tax rate over the life of the issue. We're going to have larger payments towards the end as your existing commitments come off, but that mitigates the tax implication for the plan for the property owner, and creates some consistency, which is an important piece when we're managing these types of projects from a financing perspective. The 25-year period, that's not uncommon. When we get to a project of this scale, Rosemond's project is assumed to be over 25 years, that bond issue that passed in May. And when we get to projects of this size, it's not uncommon for us to go to 25, 26, even 27. The max term is 30. In this case, we're at a 25-year repayment period with 2 bond issues. So we're not going to be paying interest on the full par amount for the full 25 years, but we are assuming a 25-year repayment period as part of the initial plan. When we look at the tax implication, we're looking at, for a $600,000 property, It's about $275,000 or $275 per year. So that's the increase. So if you go back to this chart here, that's really what we're looking as the increase in that orange bar that we flatten out over time. So that would be the increase that property owner that had a $600,000 property would see as part of that. And then that tax rate over time is meant to be consistent. So taxes would not go up over, the goal of the plan is to not have the taxes go up over that amount over the life of the issue for the district's existing capital and debt service levies. This just gives you a little comparison of the Hennepin County school districts as a whole. West Tonka has historically managed their tax levy to be the lowest in Hennepin County. And that, even with the additional bond issue and then the anticipated step up that was approved as part of the operating referendum that we are going to see with taxes payable 24, that orange bar represents the estimate of where West Tonka would be as compared to the rest of the Hennepin County school districts. And this is, if we stuck a $600,000 home in any one of these communities, this is how much they would pay. And it's derived by the tax rates that each one of these districts have and the calculations that go into it. So based on, with the overall plan, this was where we were hoping to be, is to keep taxes for the West Tonka School District low at the lowest levels in Hennepin County, and that's where we're anticipating they'll be even with the passage of a bond issue this November. This is just the details behind the entire plan. I think the main point here is we're accounting for all the principal and interest as part of the plan, which then equates out into that tax rate chart that I showed earlier. But right now our interest rate assumptions are 5% for both bond issues. We're trying to make sure we have a plan that we make sure that we can meet the tax implications that we're putting out and communicating to the public. So we want to make sure those interest rate assumptions are in that spot, and we're comfortable with where we're at with those assumptions going into our schedules that we'll be putting out to review and comment, and then ultimately would be put out for the tax impacts that the voters would see going into an election in November. So that is what I have. I can answer any questions folks have in regards to the anticipated financing and the plan. Yeah?
Yep, just one quick one. Some people, I believe, are under the assumption that we're the first to do this tax impact for 25 years. Is that the case, or could you reiterate that again for us, if this is the norm or if this is not the norm?
Yeah, so the max a school district or any municipality can do is 30 years. And it's not uncommon for us to be out in this 25-year range, especially when you're looking at a large-scale project such as this. For example, Rosemont Apple Valley Egan's plan, that's anticipated to be over 25 years. The Red Rock Central Building, which was about a $46 million project, that was over 25 or 26 years. I know Shelby was saying we had one for Chaska, I think, or Chatfield, that was over 27 years. So it's not uncommon for us to be out in this 25-year term. 20 years is where schools, if they qualify for debt aid, so that's kind of a common mark, and then 20 to 25 is not uncommon.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about the interest rates. Just want to ask some questions about the interest rate. So, how sensitive are these results to the interest rate changes?
I would say we've built in, from the standpoint of some cushion into the rates to make sure we can meet what we've put out in the schedules. If you kind of dive into the weeds a little bit, districts are often receiving premium bids, and this district has in the past. So we want to make sure those coupon rates that we especially are getting in the front end of this schedule are sufficient to make sure that we meet those tax impact implications. And then on the back side of the plan, when we have more capacity, if rates are lower, we have some ability to manage that over time. So I think overall, to answer your question, we're comfortable with where we're at from an interest rate perspective. If we were selling these today, we would be less than 5%.
Okay, that was my next question. So it'd be like 4% today, or how close are we to 5%?
Yeah, rates have been pretty kind of up and down, but I would say that 4% would be a pretty comfortable for a 20-year issue right now.
Okay, so the 5% is conservative estimate from your.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep,
So
we're comfortable
let's say
with
the
where
rates
those
go
are.
down in the future. We can repurchase bonds if we have the ability to repurchase older bonds. And
Yeah, so we've facilitated some refinancings here, right, back even to the 2019 issue. So that's a common thing that'll likely happen in this case when we're looking at the rates where we're at today. So the bonds will be sold competitively, and then there'll be a call provision in them, some kind of call date. And at that point in time, you can refinance your obligations similar to where you would look at it as a home mortgage. And if rates are lower, you can generate some savings for taxpayers. That's required to go back to taxpayers as part of that refinancing. So that's something that West Tonka has done. It's common if rates are lower that we'll be able to refinance them, or even if the rates are even lower when we get out to that second issue, we'll be able to look at the term at that point in time.
yeah, so the bottom line here is that we're being conservative, and who can predict interest rates? But if they go up, we're comfortable with what we have. But if they go down, we're going to bring more value to the system.
Right, exactly.
Matthew, we've had a lot of conversations in our committee meetings about our strategy and approach to the bonds and the two bond issues, the wraparound structure, and some of these mechanisms on how to best sort of enact these projects, but also try to manage the tax spend as best we can. Can you just talk a little bit more about some of that thinking behind why we chose the two bond structure, and kind of what were some of the sort of pros and cons or the trade-offs between some of the different strategies that we discussed?
Yeah, so really, when we look at a project of this scope, it's common, especially when you get into these larger projects where we know you're not going to spend the full amount of the project costs right away. So when we look at that from the standpoint of a timing, rates right now aren't as low as they maybe were a year and a half ago, where we maybe would add a different strategy if rates were really low. But where we're at today is it doesn't really make sense for us to be paying interest costs in the full par amount of the bonds. And as part of that, we obviously look at that you can earn some return on those bond proceeds as well. So we take that into account as we're looking at the overall strategy to try to mitigate that cost over the time. That also allows us, when we're looking at managing your tax impact, and we're getting out as part of, we get to pay some of that principal off right away as part of the plan, as we're fitting those first couple of years before we bring the rest of that interest cost on, and then we're closer out to where we can start paying principal off again faster. So overall, really, it's our, as we look at these processes with every district's a little bit unique from the standpoint of where you are from your existing debt profile. But really the goal is to try to match what your construction schedule is from the standpoint of timing of when you need that money, and then try to control that overall interest cost over that time as we're meeting that draw schedule requirement.
I did have a question for Paul too. If you wouldn't mind coming back up, I just wanted you to clarify one thing. And you can keep asking Matthew questions too. You don't have to leave, Matthew, if you don't want to. So Paul, we've also had a lot of conversations in our committee meetings about different ideas of projects, and one of the things we've discussed a lot is building new buildings, for example, and the costs associated with building a brand new building somewhere, both in the land and the construction costs and all that. Can you just give and I know you don't have to, I understand it's very hard to talk about these things without hyper-specific detail, but can you just kind of give a flavor of some of that discussion around the costs of building some of these buildings with the land and everything else versus doing some of the things that we've kind of proposed here?
Can you clarify, are you talking about that idea of building a new elementary school, or is it?
Whether it's an elementary school or a high school or a middle school, whatever it may be, the idea of building a brand new structure to sort of accomplish some of what we're trying to do here within our current constraints.
So obviously the high school has a lot of inherent value in it. There's quite a bit of work, this and the activity center have been redone. Other parts of the building have received major investments in the last decade. So there's a lot of inherent value in here. If you were going to go somewhere and build a new site, you obviously would be sort of walking away from that value and have to start over from scratch. I don't think I have a calculation in my head of sort of what that dollar value is, but to build a high school this size over again, it's easily going to be way over $100 million to do that. So there's that. It's also a challenge to find enough land, a big enough piece of land that has sewer and water access, and there's a lot of other logistical challenges that you would have to go through to do that as well.
Thank you.
I will also say that your high school was designed in a time when it was constructed in a way that makes it fairly easy to renovate. It's mostly a frame construction, and so the walls are less expensive to take down and reconfigure, and so there's some benefits to those as well.
Thank you.
Other questions for Matthew? Okay. Thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If it's all right, we'll bring up Kathy to talk about the annual budget, and then I'll talk about it, and then we can have Peter come.
Kathy, we'll do the financial report now.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathy Miller, and I'm the District Finance Director. And tonight we'll be going through the adopted budget for next school year, fiscal year 24. Excuse me. Before we jump into the adopted budget, I wanted to take just a moment to look at our revenue and expenses through the end of May. Our revenues are at $29 million, or 82.5% of our revised budget, which is shown in the yellow column. And our expenses that we have issued since the end of May are $29,377,000 of our revised budget, or 82.1%. Both the revenues and the expenditures are at appropriate levels as we enter the last month of the fiscal year. Okay, on to the adopted budget. Tonight I'll be highlighting the high points of our proposed 23-24 adopted budget. The School Board Finance Committee has been busy. We met in April, and we met again last Thursday on June 1st to discuss the adopted budget. And I'd like to personally thank board members Brian Carlson, Pastor Lauren Davis, Ralph Harrison, and Superintendent Borg for their time and commitment to the Finance Committee this year. As we go through the presentation this evening, please feel free to stop me and ask questions. Otherwise, we'll also have time at the end of the presentation. The cornerstone of every school budget is enrollment. Almost all of our funding sources are based on how many students we serve. This chart gives a 5-year review of our enrollment trends and what we're estimating for the upcoming school year. Historically, our school district has been very blessed with stable enrollment. Like most districts across the nation, COVID-19 disrupted our trend slightly. We had a large graduating class last week of over 200 students, and so we're coming in with next year's budget with a more conservative assumption. And when we look at our enrollment projections beyond next year, we are assuming enrollment growth and into the following years. All school districts in Minnesota need to approve a budget by July 1st, and there's a lot of unknowns at this time. And so this slide summarizes all of our assumptions in this budget. As I mentioned, our enrollment, we have done a lot of study. We're expecting 2,383 students, which is a decline over the prior year because of the large graduating class. Our revenues, we are expecting a 4% increase that we recently received from the legislature, 4% in other categorical aids. The OPEB operating funds, according to our actuarial study, will be drawing almost $230,000 from the OPEB funds. Because our tax base is growing, we have the added capital projects revenue of just about $105,000 in this budget. And lastly, the big highlight is this In this next year budget, it will be our fourth and last year of step one of our operating referendum, which includes the inflation factor. Expenditure assumptions include salary and benefit estimates as set by the board. We always put in a contingency for added staff needed, lane change opportunities. Highlights in our personnel categories are our group health insurance, our group dental insurance, and even our group life insurance all received 0% increases for next school year. All other salary, non-salary, and non-benefit costs in this budget were increased at 2%. With the exception of utilities and supplies, we did increase those at the rate of 3%. This next slide shows our general fund revenue by source. So basically, where does our money come from? And you can see on this chart that the lion's share of our funding comes from the state of Minnesota. The far right-hand column shows next year's budget that we're projecting, and the left-hand side is our revised budget. You can see it's a pretty similar pattern, but with this recent legislation, the state is picking up more of the tab at 2/3, and our COVID funding is dropping off, so there's just a slight downtick in federal funds. Otherwise, we typically feel that the state is 2/3, and the other categories are 1/3. This next slide shows the general fund expenditures by program. When comparing this to last year, the expenditures where we spend our money are almost identical. The percentages indicate West Tonka does a fantastic job of spending the majority of our district dollars in the classroom, directly benefiting students. The areas are regular instruction, special education, instructional support, and pupil support services. The graph before you shows our anticipated fund balance at the end of the 23-24 school year, and also the prior year history of our general fund unassigned and assigned fund balance. The 23-24 budget that we just went over, that I just went over, indicates that we are going to have a small uptick in our fund balance of just slightly over $52,000. We are grateful to the legislature for passing an education bill that included significant funding for Minnesota schools. However, keep in mind that in the current school year, we had planned on drawing $492,000 from our assigned balance to balance this year's budget. This new funding helped correct that challenge as well as help us to land at a balanced budget this school year. One other item in terms of legislation, the legislative session just closed 2 weeks ago today, and we are still kind of combing through all of the financial requirements and accounting for all of those. When we have the revised budget in January, we'll bring back more details on those once we receive all the information. As you can see, the past few years, our fund balance has hovered between 10 and 15%. In this adopted budget, we are planning on our fund balance being $4.9 million or 13.22%. This stays right in the middle of our fund balance policy goal of 8 to 18%. We monitor this very closely with our projection planning models and also our district finance committee. Fiscal responsibility, long-term planning, and forecasting is a top priority. In addition to general fund, which is obviously our largest fund, we also manage 4 other funds, and I'll go through those briefly and give you a highlight on the screen of our expected fund balance, what our revenues and expenditures will be, and where we're planning on ending June 30th, 2024. The first fund that we manage also is student activities. These account for monies that include things such as Wolfridge, Student Senate, DECA, extracurricular, co-curricular. Most of their student fundraising dollars that they fundraise and then have events for the student. They are forecasting just a slight gain collectively of all the various student activity funds. Food service. The West Tonka foodies have done a fabulous job and have been very creative. I especially give them a lot of kudos during COVID to get all of our kids fed. They have had a successful past couple years to grow their fund balance with the funding and a lot of the grants through COVID that they were eligible for. You can see in this budget that they're forecasting a slight usage of their fund balance. That's very intentional. They're taking this opportunity to update a few equipment items and look forward to, again, still maintaining a solid fund balance. Looking into next year, one item that we're really excited about with the new legislation is universal meals. Our students will receive a free breakfast and lunch at no charge beginning on July 1st. Next is community education. This has really been an exciting fun to watch as they've built and regrew. The community education department houses our school-age childcare called Adventure Club, our youth after-school enrichments, summer enrichment programs, our adult programming, our West Tonka Activity Center, early childhood programs, adult basic education, early childhood family ed, and preschool screening, just to name a few. Our community ed is just in a very solid rebuilding mode since the pandemic is behind us, and their mission is to just continue to offer exceptional programming and to rebuild their fund balance. The next category is debt service. And debt service is where we account for our semi-annual principal and interest payments for our bonds. We have a 2012 bond, a 2016 bond for this space, and 2018 bonds for our abatement projects. In the fall of 2020, as Matt mentioned, we were pleased to refinance our 2012 bonds to secure a lower interest rate. The refinancing of the 2012 bonds saved taxpayers more than $1 million in interest cost. The next category is trust. That houses our scholarship receipts and disbursements for our students. This spring, Mound West Tonka High School awarded over $285,000 worth of scholarships to our students. You can see that this budget accounts for just a portion. There's $86,000. Those are the only scholarships that we're the fiscal agent for. Some people just give directly to the students, or they may be coming from a different foundation, but our students are very, very blessed. The last two funds are the Internal Service Fund and OPEB Trust Fund. Our Internal Service Fund houses our dental and health insurance activity, and our projections are showing that we are going to have another steady year of growth in our self-insurance. In fact, we're so pleased with our self-insurance that we were able to secure zero increase, as I mentioned earlier, for medical and dental. We have a very active employee benefit committee and an advisor. We meet monthly and monitor these statistics very closely. And again, the last fund is OPEB. This tracks our post-employment benefits activities for our retirees, both implicit and explicit amounts. At the end of June 30th, 2024, we will have just under $3.5 million that will be set aside and earmarked for further retiree obligations. That concludes the adopted budget. Later on your agenda, you'll see an action item to approve this budget. And please keep in mind, this is our adopted budget, and we'll be back this winter once we know more about the details of the legislation, once we know our first semester enrollment, and we'll be back in February for that. At this time, I open it up for any questions, or Superintendent Borgett, you're welcome to add any comments as well.
First, are there any questions for Kathy? Kathy, before you go down, just want you to talk a little bit about Action F, your ability to get a grant for the indoor air quality, and then if you could just also talk about the copier lease renewal.
Oh, sure. There was a lot of different COVID funding, and one thing our department took great pride in is managing and trying to find the funds. There was grants through the federal government, some through Hennepin County, and then some schools, I'm not sure why, but they didn't use all their funds, and so if there's funds that went back to the state, there were opportunities for reissuing those back to districts that had requests, and there was a particular grant that had a sizable amount that we put in for, and it was called a COVID testing grant, and you could use that for indoor air quality, nursing, I can't even remember all the different categories, but we put in for that, and we received, I think, over 200,000 additional. We used some for nursing, and most importantly, we submitted an application to the state to improve an air quality issue that we had that needed correcting at Hilltop Elementary, and they granted those funds to be used for that project. So we received bids, and we're very excited to have almost all of that funded, or a large portion funded at our elementary school through the grant.
And so the issue was that the dehumidification of space, those systems were going out, and it allowed us to invest in that, and it was a great savings to taxpayers and a way to bring dollars into the district. So nice job with that.
Thank you. Yeah, we were very excited about that.
Then if you could just talk about the copier lease.
Sure. We have a copier lease with Loeffler companies, and we've been very happy with them. Our previous lease, or the original lease, was for 5 years, and we were really fortunate during COVID, where there was a lot of distance learning. Our copiers weren't being used as hard, and a lot of things were being done electronically. So after the 5-year lease, we did a 3-year release, is what it was called. So we basically just kind of limped along for 3 more years with the original lease that was paid. And so now the machines we have are 8 years old. So I'm thrifty, so I asked about doing another release, and they told me no. So we had to go out to bid, and we are using state contract pricing. We went through all of our machines. 8 years ago, you used 3-hole punches, you used staplers, a lot of things we don't need anymore. So we went through machine by machine. We met with each building and right-sized, people don't copy as much as they used to, so we even downsized a lot of our copiers. In our staff, we met with each department that may be affected, and they were wonderful. And so we're really pleased to present the quote for Loeffler for our Canon multifunction printers.
Great. Okay. Any last questions for Kathy?
Well, just a quick point on this $200,000 grant that we got. I mean, do all the districts? Why wouldn't all the districts apply for this, or did you? How did you happen to know about it?
I just found an email on it.
So you were proactive to get this.
That's right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks much.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kathy.
Okay. If it's all right, Mr. Chair, I'll just give you a brief superintendent's report and then speak to some of the action items, and then Peter will be here. He can talk about the survey for you. First of all, we, as Serenity said, we had our graduation, and we love to be able to host that on Hador Field now. We had a chance of storms, and that's one thing we don't chance, and so we knew that the pop-up storms could happen. We know that that's a favorite with the kids, but when you have that many people and you have some people that deal with some mobility issues, that wasn't a chance worth taking, and we brought everybody into the gym. We have a new high school principal, Jolene Herfel, and she did a remarkable job with graduation, as did our students and our faculty. A couple of my highlights of this year's graduation was, of course, watching the 200 kids walk across that stage, and everyone can think about that special moment of them going across the stage. I also think the student speakers and how it was very student-led. Serenity was the MC of our event. The choir and the band sounded great. That's one advantage you get sometimes by being indoors, is you can hear those sounds a little bit better than what you can outdoors. And also, Jolene knows that sitting on a bleacher bench isn't always comfortable, and she moved that along, and graduation here was over in under an hour and a half, hour and 15 minutes. And so very efficiently run, a lot of great feedback on it, and really appreciate. That's a big undertaking to take on a graduation of a really special day, and she did a really nice job, and happy for our community. We had our end of the year celebrations at our different buildings, and so since our last board meeting, we had Wolf Ridge with Director Roth was on with students, and just a rite of passage. But one thing that was unique this year is we had Shirley Hills and Hilltop up for the same week. And it was really nice. One, having it the week before Memorial Weekend is really a nice week. Not only is it a week later, so weather can be a little bit better, but that comes into Memorial Weekend, which is a well-deserved rest for everyone that's working the Wolf Ridge event. But it was, I think, a lot of good feedback on having both buildings up there at the same year. We have a long tradition with Wolf Ridge, and it's great to hear the good stories coming back from there. Jeff mentioned about activities, and so there's a lot of wonderful things that have happened. One stat that Jeff shared with me is Mount Westonka over the last 3 years has the highest number of conference championships in the Wright County Conference. And so you start looking at the number and the level of success, but this year was a really special year for a lot of kids, and a lot of different kids experiencing not only engagement but success. And so we're happy as we look at the end, and we have 2 golfers today that qualified for state, and we have a number of kids in track this weekend. And so not only did we break some section records, but school records. And if you ever have an opportunity to go down below, you can see a number of people in our community, but some of these records go back 30, 40 years. And so to see some of those school records fall this year, and some of the long time held school records. In fact, one, Mark Stromboy ran the 400, I believe, in 47 or 48 seconds. And so a lot of really long-standing records with some really good times. And it's hard to mention one because then you should mention everybody, but it's just really proud of all of those kids. And so activities was good. This space, we come over and we have the Westonka Community Theater is going to be taking over. In fact, they were here scheduled, and we asked to have this meeting so we had space in case there was a number of people that wanted to attend. But that will be going on over the next month and a half, and a performance coming up this summer with the community theater. We talked a little bit about Adventure Club. And the summer is filled with Adventure Club, number of kids. We have over 200 students, 250 students. And not only is that wonderful that we can provide care to so many families, but it's really, they do a nice job of combining it with youth enrichment and care. So they can put their classes in while they're here, and parents really appreciate that. One thing that's on your agenda for today is a resolution regarding a new state holiday around Juneteenth. And we received news when this was passed in February, it was going to be enacted in 2024. And then later in legislation, we found out about a week ago that this actually changed to 2023, that it's a state holiday. We're asking you today to take a resolution, which we can do when it's a necessity, and there's a couple things that we're calling out as a necessity that we still hold even though this is a state holiday. And it's really due to the late notice of finding out that this holiday has come upon us. And so one thing that we're asking the board to pass this resolution for is that we can continue with the Adventure Club Care, where we don't have to disrupt that. We also run a meal program this summer, and it would allow us to continue the meal program. The third thing we looked at were long-standing contracts or multi-day contracts that we have, which we have one camp that leaves that day and they're gone for multiple days and they go out of the state, and so we didn't want to pull that from them. But those are what we're calling out as necessity, which is allowed by law. but we would ask for your resolution to approve that. The next year, then, that will be a holiday, and we won't schedule events on that day. We'll reschedule a number of things, and we apologize for the inconvenience to parents in the community, but that's where we drew the line for where a necessity was, and for the purpose of just making sure we don't interrupt services for our parents more than what we have to. A couple other things that you see on your agenda here today. We have a couple teachers on special assignment, and they have some different titles, and we're going to entitle those deans instead of the titles that they currently have, which is behavior interventionist specialist or school connections coordinator, so simply calling those deans. But we were able to get a grant that we're asking to add some days to their contract, about 25 days, which they can help oversee our multi-tiered systems of support efforts in our different, at both primaries and our high school. And so that is going to help us with academic, social, emotional, and behavior attendance in our different buildings. And we're excited about being able to get their expertise and working with kids. Want to thank Dr. Russman for her application of that grant and the success with that, because that helps offset that cost. Lastly, you're going to see a couple creative ideas in your agenda packet today, one of which is approving the Mount Westonka High School Athletics Game of the Week. I think the high school is trying to think of how can they focus some less attended days a week and bring some more energy around it. One thing they're asking is for students that if it is the game of the week, that they don't have to pay a fee to get in. And so what you're taking action on is a way that we can highlight some of our kids, trying to promote school spirit and pride, and take away the fee for our kids on those days. In your agenda, you're going to see that we're asking for a little bit of hours for the Westonka, our food service, as we go to free meals, and which includes breakfast and lunch. It does not include a la carte, so kids still should carry a lunch account if they're planning on getting a la carte items, but it does qualify you for a free breakfast and a free lunch. But we know that service hours are going to increase, and so they were very specific in where they're asking to apply some of those hours. Kathy got new rates for our property and casualty workman's comp renewal, and so that is in your action. And then finally, we're going to be asking you to approve some questions around the budget. Brings us back to one of the reason why we decided to hold the meeting in here was action item B, which is the resolution, not B, E, the resolution to authorize the preparation of the review and comment, and then also to prepare the ballot language for the June 10th school board meeting. So a review and comment needs to be completed to get approval for a bond project from the state, and it requires some time to put that together. What we're asking for you is your approval that we put that together and submit it to the state, which we plan on doing with your approval by the end of this month. They're running a little bit longer with turnaround times, and we feel it's important that we get that done timely and back, and so we would be looking to do that, and then we would amend it based on your July 10th action. The second thing that we're asking for is the ability to put together ballot language for November 7th, and that the full board gives us the authority to do that. And in our fall election, November 7th, we will have 4 school board seats that are up for election. You will see there's an action which I referred to a little bit earlier, which was resolution or action item B, which was to be able to bring in, we have the board election piece. The second piece that I would highlight is we would have a renewal of a capital projects levy. Our capital projects levy pays for our technology levy. This year, we're looking at, in the language, also including security technology into the language, and then that would allow us to keep current with some of our ways that we keep kids safe. We also would highlight print and digital curriculum in it. So we believe that the scope is very consistent with the technology levy that's in existence, but we want to be specific that we would be looking at making renewals of security technology. So what that could include is video cameras at our different buildings, or maybe there's ways that we check in students or visitors in our offices. It would include technology that we'd review in that way. And then lastly, the bond. And you've seen and heard conversation for a long time around this. I would say that in my 17 years here, I'm really excited about the opportunity to advance opportunities for our kids. It's beyond, our community expects that we have systems that keep kids safe. And when we look at keeping kids safe, we know that is our operation systems. It's our relationship with our school resource officers. It's the way that, it's our culture of see something, say something. But it's also having responsive facilities. And what we're presenting is not everything that can be done. We're presenting things that we think can make a difference for our kids if we had here in West Tonkin. That's secured entrances at the middle school and at the high school. And at the high school, it's our main entrance and also our north entrance, the volume of kids, and when they enter on weekends and nights, we feel that's important. Secondly, when we look at maintenance, we're not doing every maintenance project. Clearly, there's always more on old facilities that you can do, but we're trying to do systems that really are done wisely together and that can keep our buildings functioning where it does not tax our operating budget. And so we've listed out the things that we're looking at on our website, and people can see what those maintenance items are. And then finally, the redesign of the high school. And I said it in my community presentation, and I would say it again today, that I believe by what we're talking about, not only through opportunities, but through the design of school, not only will it be more functional, not only will it be more safe, I really believe that kids are going to see higher levels of success. And I say that by, if you can work with kids on engaging them in what they're interested in. So you talk about vocational opportunities. If you give them space that they're comfortable and they can do their work, which we're talking about enlarging the size of the classrooms. We look at the changes that have happened in special ed from the 70s and the 90s to where we are today. And we talk about the growth of things like autism and trying to make sure that we serve those kids, not where we can get them, but in a space that was designed to work with them. When we start looking at areas of physical fitness and performing those in hallways versus in a space that's designed for it, in a cafeteria. And a cafeteria is not just for lunch, it's how we exit this building. It's looking at our programming before and after school. It's study halls. It's different events that we hold in that space. So you look at our classrooms and the renovations that they would exist in some of these new spaces. I really believe that what's happened in the 70s and 90s, taking something that's improved to serve our kids well, I really have a lot of confidence that this will be a good investment for our community. I've really appreciated, and I've tried to put myself out there with every email, trying to give the details of what we're talking about, trying to seek people out of what their comments are. And I can share with you that the input that I've gotten most often isn't that they don't agree with the scope that we're talking about. The most common feedback that I have is they would like us to do what we're talking about and another project. And that other project really connects to what their interest probably would be. Some of it is activity-based, some of it's academic-based. But I have not heard criticism by any margin of a specific part of this project. Rather, I've heard a lot of excitement around vocational. I've heard a lot of excitement about helping improve working with kids with special needs, with some of our student services and mental health, the importance of security. And so obviously all of you in this time have heard different feedbacks from people. But I would share that the feedback that I've received is when we've taken input, whether it's in survey or the forms, those are on our website. And then the anecdotal feedback that I've received has been almost entirely positive around this project. And that's why we hold nights like tonight, because we really do want to hear the community. If there's different concerns, that we can do it in a way that really serves them well. And so I just open it up for any questions about some of these action items or some of what I just shared, because I want to make sure that people are comfortable sending me forward with that action.
Kevin and Gary, maybe, I don't know if you can catch Peter Levin, but I might recommend that we maybe push him to July meeting instead of...
He's going to be here in about 5 minutes.
Okay, perfect.
Can we move on to?
Yep.
All right, while we're waiting for Peter, we'll move, the chair moves for approval of the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Just skip E. Skip E until Peter speaks.
Yeah, we can go with the other items. Yep.
All right, we'll move on to discussion items. Chair moves for approval of action item 8A, approval of the 2023-24 adopted budgets. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Chair moves for approval of action item 8B, approval of resolution regarding necessity to conduct certain school board business on June 19th, 2023. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Action item 8C. Chair moves for approval of action item 8C, approval of addition of a .5 FTE English language learner ELL teacher. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair moves for approval of action item 8D, approval of resolution establishing dates for filing affidavits of candidacy. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Excuse me, this has to be done by a roll call vote.
Roll call, yep.
So who seconded it? Just so
Kelly did.
Kelly did, thank you. So I've got just a list here, they're not alphabetical, but Gary Woolner,
Yes.
okay. Heidi Marty,
Aye.
Ralph Harrison,
Aye.
Lauren Davis is an aye, Brian Carlson,
Aye.
Kelly Bovee,
Aye.
and Brian Rose.
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Is there another roll call item, Lauren?
That is the one that we're waiting to hear the presentation on first.
I see.
So that will come after that.
We'll skip E and move on to F. Right now, the chair moves for approval action item 8F, approval of Hilltop Indoor Air Quality quote. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Chair moves for approval of action item 8G, approval to increase athletic registration fees from $270 to $350 for boys and girls hockey. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair,
One comment on that item there, that is to allow for more ice time for some of these kids versus what they've had now, and so it's a way to give them additional ice time at Thaler.
Chair moves for approval of action item 8H, approval of promoting a Mound Westonka Schools Athletics Game of the Week. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair moves for approval of action item 8I, approval of adding labor to the Westonka Foodies contracts for 23-24. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair moves for approval of action item 8J, approval of the elimination of the .99 FTE educational paraprofessional position at Mount Westonka High School. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Chair moves for approval of action item 8K, approval of changing the teacher on special assignment behavior intervention specialist position to TOSA Dean of Students position at Hilltop Primary School. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair moves for approval of action item 8L, approval of changing the teacher on special assignment school connections coordinator position to TOSA Dean of Students position at Mount Westonka High School. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair moves for approval of action item 8M, approval of changing the teacher on special assignment behavior intervention specialist position to TOSA Dean of Students position at Shirley Hills Primary School. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
There's nothing playing.
Chair moves for approval of action item 8N, approval of increasing Westonka Activity Center membership rates and fees. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair moves for approval of action item 8O, approval of the updates and wage increases in AR 4230 salary guide for community education and service personnel. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair moves for approval of action item 8P, approval of staff development revenue waiver. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Chair moves for approval of action item 8Q, approval of copier lease renewal. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair moves for approval of action item 8R, approval to update policy 4325. Anything to say on that one?
No, this is really just doing the main update that we do annual to the policy. There's a few changes as we go from what is known as a VEBA to a different trust, but otherwise this functions still as the same insurance that we use for HRA.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And chair moves for approval of action item 8S, approval of property and casualty and workers' compensation renewal. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Peter, you're on.
You can introduce him at all, or?
So for the community, we have worked with Morris Leatherman for some past years of trying to understand the perceptions of our community as it relates to the different bonds or different questions that we're looking into, levies. And so they have surveyed not just for the school district, but also for some of our cities in the past, as they have around the metro and outstate. And so pleasure to have you here, Peter, to talk a little bit about the latest survey that was just completed.
It's a pleasure, and I apologize for the delay. It's 55 minutes from Farmington with no traffic. We spoke with 625 randomly selected residents across the community. Interviews were conducted between April 19th and May 4th. Average interview time was 7 minutes. This was a much shorter survey than we did last year, much more concise. Non-response rate was 4.5%. The 625 samples projectable to plus or minus 4% in 95 out of 100 cases. Some of the demographics, 55% are cell phone only households, 10% are landline only households, and then 35% are both landline and cell phone. That's the composition of the calls. If we look at the composition of the demographics of the results, amongst the residential longevity, we had 38% indicate that they lived in the district for 20 years or more. 18% had been in the district for 5 years or less. Median on this one comes in the typical resident right at 15 years. The typical resident has lived in the community. 14% had preschoolers or infants. 27% had children attending the Westonka School District, and then the remaining 66% are empty nesters. And that does not imply an age. Once again, you could have a 30-year-old without a child. It's lack of presence of a child is an empty nester. So when you look at the data, 1 in 3 have a child, 2 out of 3 do not have a child in the district. 19% were renters, self-assessed home value. Now this is probably going to skew on the high side because people always assume their home value is a little bit higher than typical, is right around $500,000. If we continue with the demographics, 22% indicate they're 18 to 34-year-olds, while we have 37% over the age of 55. Median on this one comes in the typical resident right at about 47 years. 15% are high school graduates or less. 21% or 31% have some college experience, and then the majority are college graduates. That includes 4-year degree, master's degrees, or other postgraduate degrees. 6% more Republicans than Democrat, with 29% independent. And the final set of demographics, and the first one really is a key factor for what we're seeing across the state of Minnesota this year, is the financial situation of the household. The macroeconomics is having a huge play on people's support levels for any sort of a funding request. You actually have 41% financially stressed. That's the low that I have in 2023. To give you a comparison, where we are at right now is 55% financially stressed across the state. Within the metro area, it's 52%. To give you an idea in context, before the pandemic, the norm was 28%. We never got to this level in all the data that we did over the past 3 years in looking at the financial insecurity of a household to this level of the pandemic. It actually now, we're getting close to approaching where we were with the recession 2008, 2009. The macroeconomics. So you are on the lower end at 41%, indicating they're financially stressed. Men and women were equally represented, 50-50, and then the geographic area of the respondents, 45% in Mound, 28% in Minnetrista, 16% in Orono, 9% in Spring Park, and then the remaining 2% in the other areas of the district. We look back at just a few perceptions that we tested last year, just to see if there's any significant changes. The first one, does the district spend taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently? That actually increased from last year. We were at 72% last year, now we're at 79%. The norm's gone up a little bit, but the norm right now is 58%, indicating that they think the district spends taxpayers' money effectively and efficiently. So on that one, it compares favorably to last year. It compares very favorably to the current metro averages that we're looking at. Does the district do a good job of involving the community? 82% indicate that that's the case. The norm on this right now is 68%. The pandemic caused the people to feel that they weren't being able to be involved at the level simply because it was difficult to involve the community at points. So the 82% is very strong. Does the district do a good job of communicating? Absolutely. 4 out of 5, unchanged from last year. Are they satisfied with decision making? And once I mentioned this last year, there were different points during the pandemic that this would have been changed greatly. In the fall of 20, the fall of 21, everybody had to make difficult decisions, virtual, masking, all of that. And so the norm at those points were 50-50 for districts in saying that they were satisfied with decision making. You've netted out now at 82-13. So about a 6-to-1 ratio. The current ratio is about 3-to-1 in favor of the decision making of the district. And then finally on this one, the question is, the schools are a good investment and I would support a property tax increase to protect that investment. So the key on this one is the disagreement, the core opposition at 27%. It grew a little bit, and part of that is the economic situation of the households combined with a greater property tax hostility. But still, the norm on this right now we're seeing in 2023 is about 33% in that core opposition, so about 6% less than we see. I mentioned you're different on one of the macro issues. Another area you're different on in property taxes is the issue of 2023. I've made the comparison in November 15th, a light switch was turned on in this state. People got their assessments last year, and a lot of them were very excited because their house was worth more. They didn't think about the impact on their property taxes until they opened their statement up on November 15th, and then property tax hostility basically tripled. What we're finding right now, the norm on this in the metro area in the very high and somewhat high is 55%. And I actually just ran a community this morning that was at 78%, very high and somewhat high. You're one of the lowest. There are 3 districts. Ironically, Farmington was only at 49% when I presented an hour ago there. You're one of the 3 districts that I would classify as tax sensitive. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to be thrilled with the property tax increase. It means they're willing to have a conversation about it. When you get to 70, 75% property tax hostility, it's hard to even get to that point of a conversation. So on those 2 major issues, you have concerns there, but it's not the level that we've seen in all the other districts and cities we've worked with. Is the district adequately funded? This question deserves an asterisk because this was done before the legislature finished its work. And what we saw over the course of 12 months of campaigning for the legislature, the governor's race, and the discussion on Minnesota public schools not being fully funded is the politicians set up a problem that needed a solution. And so you can see that you actually have an increase of 14% indicating that no, the schools are not adequately funded. How this nets out after they've come up with all the work that they did will play out in public opinion over the course of the summer on whether this changes people's perceptions or not. How do they rate the school buildings and facilities in the West Tonka Public Schools? Last year, 85% rated them positively. This time, 93% rate them positively. It's a softer positive. There's much more good than excellent. But typically, people don't believe that the facilities are in disrepair or anything. They view that the facilities overall are good. What's their predisposition if they heard the district was going to ask for a property tax increase? We start out, or you start out, at an even split. 26% are for all, 26% are against all, and you have 47% persuadable. This is pretty typical for what we've seen now in 15 years of public research. I always say on this question, you have more than half the people that have made up their mind with no information. Because I haven't told them whether it's a bond referendum or an operating levy, we haven't told them the dollar amounts, they're either for it or against it, just on overarching principle. The key is going to be, though, the 47% that are persuadable. So you come out as a wash. You have equal percent core support to core opposition. What we're finding in 2023 right now, the typical district is at a -5, which means they have 5% more opposition at the outset than core support. Now, all right, let's make a deal question. What's a reasonable property tax increase? Well, the 29% then, when we ask for a dollar amount, say nothing. What we look for on that is it less than 35%? That's kind of a threshold when you have a third of people indicating that they're not for any property tax increase. So then when we look at those that support a property tax increase, this chart is interesting. Typically, to be frank, it's a ski slope from nothing down to the outer. You actually have a valley in your chart. You have 11% at $6 a month, 18% at 12, 17% at 18, and then you actually have 16% at 24 or more. The median comes in roughly at about $14 a month, is where the resident that's willing to accept a property tax increase deems is reasonable. Now, is that number set in stone? It's not. There's an elasticity to it, or there can be a regression from that. It depends on what's being asked for in the proposal, which is why we go through and break out the 4 components of the proposal. And on this one, safety and security, 76% indicate that they support a property tax increase for that purpose. In fact, 51% strongly support a property tax for that purpose. 67% support the interior redesign of the high school, 40% strongly. Deferred maintenance, 68%, 39% strongly, and the high school track, 62% with 36% strongly. So with all of those components being highly supported, there would be a potential for elasticity. When we see in districts where there's support drops, where you have 35–40% support in concept, that's what I call that you'll get regression from that number. So we asked folks for an overall evaluation of the idea of the needs that we've suggested, the list of improvements. And it nets out that 69% indicate they think it's a good idea, 29% a bad idea, and 2% are unsure. There's not a lot of intensity. Only 1 in 6 feel strongly this way, 11% strong good idea, 5% bad idea. But it nets out overall that they think it sounds like a good idea. What about the $93 million fair price? The reasonableness. This is kind of the sticker shock question. And this is pretty much what we find. And it doesn't matter if I'm doing a survey in outstate Minnesota and it's a $20 million bond, or working with Apple Valley, Rosemont, Egan, and it's a $495 million bond. The price tag is ethereal. $93 million doesn't mean it's something they think about. But then what's the reaction? And we typically see this. About 50% say yeah, about a third say no, and the rest say I'm unsure. Because the key for folks is how much it costs them. Okay, whether it's 93 or 71, 15, or what have you. So we pull it together and we told them that a $93 million bond referendum would cost a $400,000 house $15 a month, and a $600,000 house, $23 a month. So on a $500,000 home in the community, it would be approximately $19 a month. A little bit higher than the tolerance, but you can see the impact then of the support that you have for the components you're looking at. It nets out that you have 62% support to 34% opposition, 3% are unsure. Only a quarter of the community feels strongly one way or the other. It splits evenly, strong support to strong opposition. And then we look at the likely voters. We ask folks, are you registered to vote? How likely, or have you always voted in the past? Are you absolutely certain to vote in November? I pulled those folks out. It was approximately 32% of the sample. Now that's probably on the high side, especially turnout. You know, you don't want to tell people you don't vote, just like you don't want to tell people you don't recycle. And so it always skews a little bit high. Typically, it would be somewhere probably turnout at the 20 to 25% level. The reason we look at this, though, with likely voters is to see at this point in time, are likely voters more supportive or less supportive? Because it'd be indicative if there's an issue with the package, if it's less supportive than the whole community at this point. And you can see amongst likely voters, it goes up a little bit. It's not statistically significant, but you don't have any concern that it drops. It's 64% support, 32% opposed, 4% are unsure. If you look at intensity, there's more intensity. We go from 25% to a third, but it's still even, 17 to 15%. What's the reason for their position? At this point in time, there's been really no campaign. It's just been the discussion, the facilities discussion going through it. So you have education's important. You have reasonable cost, but then you have need. Need is the driver for people's behavior to vote in and off your election. And so I would expect that to grow over the course if you do decide to go and have and there's a campaign that need would rise to the top over education support, and then 13% indicate that they have a child. What's the reason for opposition? This goes into the macro issues, the property taxes and the economic insecurity. You have 11% indicating the cost is too high, 10% indicating their taxes are too high, 8% poor district spending, 4% no children, only 1% said it wasn't needed. So if you look at a need proposition, it's 13-1 in favor of need. The opposition, basically, about 2/3 of them come from a position of the cost of the package. Either the cost is too high or the taxes are already too high at this point in time. What about purchasing land for future needs? As part of the referendum, 39% indicate that they support, 55% oppose, and 6% are unsure. So on this one, as part of a referendum, the priorities are definitely the 4 items that you've selected to include in the package at this point in time. And then where are folks getting their information? 25% get their information from the district newsletter, 16% from word of mouth, 14% from the website, 13% from the local newspaper, 12% from email. On this one, you're following the trend now that we're seeing across the metro area. The metro area now is becoming small town outstate Minnesota. The grapevine is growing, and it's growing because local newspapers either they're disappearing or they're not covering school districts and cities they were the way they were in the past. And so what's happening is, especially over 55-year-old residents, and specifically men, are forming their own word of mouth. They're not going to go to the website. They're not going to go to social media. And so they've become a secondary grapevine source where traditionally it's younger parents, ECFE parents, households with children involved in sports and everything. So it's pretty typical now in the metro area that if the word of mouth isn't first, it's second. And we see that here. Now, what's the most effective way to receive information? On this one, if we look at print versus electronic, 35% say mailed newsletter, 12% say the local newspaper, 5% community education catalog. So on this one, we have about 52% of majority that wants something in their hands as the most effective way to communicate. What about on the electronic side? You have 21% email, 13% website, 5% social media. So on this one, you have about just under 40% indicating they want to push a button. So it's an even split, and there's a very specific demographic for both groups. Print for older folks, electronic for younger folks is pretty typical. That's the divide, so both have to be done well for your citizens. I mean, overall, I would say that when you look at the package that we've tested and has been formulated, unlike a lot of districts I've gone to present to in 2023, where I have to say, you know, I've told a few districts, there's no way you can pass anything this year. I think the work done and everything, this looks like a good plan in the minds of residents. It lines up pretty closely with the tax tolerance, and it lines those 4 components line up with support in the community of a potential funding request from the school district. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good report.
It's very
Appreciate
thorough.
all the information.
I don't have a question, I just have a quick statement on how proud I am of our finance committee. That was a huge number, you know, 79% of our community thinks we handle our financial stuff effectively. So kudos to everybody on that, and it was awesome to see such a big number.
Okay.
Thanks for making the line drive here.
Thanks for coming all this way.
Home to bed. Thank you.
Another 55 minutes back? No. All right, we'll move on to discussion item E. Chair moves for approval of action item 8E, approval of resolution authorizing preparation and submission of the proposal to the Commissioner of Education for review and comment on the proposed project and taking other actions with respect thereof. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Oh, excuse me, roll call.
This is a roll call.
Roll call.
Yep. Gary Woolner,
Aye.
Heidi Marty,
Aye.
Ralph Harrison,
Aye.
Lauren Davis, aye. Brian Carlson,
Aye.
Kelly Bovee,
Aye.
Ryan Roth.
Aye.
Motion carries.
So, board members, what I will do for the July 10th board meeting is prepare an action item for ballot language that would bring forth on November 7th renewal of the capital projects levy, a bond that covers what we discussed today. And then also, just so everyone knows, we have 4 school board seats also up at that election.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
That being said, does anybody else have anything else? If not, Chair moves for adjournment. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.